for the final project, it's down here in December 13th. You can bring it up bigger. You're going to have your two mood boards, one for color and one for style. Those were due a couple weeks ago. You're going to have 4 total textile designs. You have already done 2. You're going to do another one for homework tonight. It's due in 2 weeks. We don't have class next Thursday. And you are going to print those appropriately. We can get into that a little bit further. And then you're going to print 3 colorways for each of those textile designs. So one of them is shown at full scale, and then the other 2 are like split on a half page. And 4 texture mapped photos or illustrations of each of these prints on a garment. So each print should be placed on a different photo. You shouldn't use the same model for each photograph. You shouldn't take just like one white dress and use it over and over again. For each, you gotta choose different models, because you should kind of be thinking towards different end garments to a certain extent, or different end uses, and designing towards your end use. Does that final make sense? Cool. For your textile designs, just like normal, and I really hope this makes sense now, if you're designing a large scale print that's going to end up being printed larger than 11 by 14, and we'll hit this again when we review colorways, you also need to show a smaller print, right? Show it in a smaller scale so that we can evaluate the flow of the repeat. So you don't need to show 2 scales for every print. It's only if your repeats, like if the structure of your repeat is big, right? It's only if it's going to be bigger than the screen. Okay, beautiful. So that's the final project. And we are also working towards kind of getting things reprinted for your reviews, right? So I want to review mood boards, because when you look back at your prints, at your mood boards today, or at your files today, you might find that you don't like them as much and they require a second look, or maybe you just want to get back in there and add some color chips on it. So we'll talk through all of that. Things that I really value in a mood board, like this is one of mine, for example, is I prefer for there not to be too many squares in it. I prefer to have like taken the time to cut out these shapes. It's not that I never use squares, because that's not true. But I do appreciate it when there's at least one element on a design board. Like this one has a lot of overlapping squares, which gives it some interest. And then I do have an element here that's kind of been cut off of a shape that's been cut out. Like here, I don't have almost any square edges. I've really made it a dynamic design board with lots of, I was really into fading at this point. So I do all of my design boards in Photoshop. I know that some of you use Illustrator, and I think that that's fine. I think it's important to get comfortable with Photoshop for sure. But you can do this sort of thing in Illustrator too, right? We've talked about clipping masks. If you want a review on clipping masks, you can ask me. But I'm gonna do it in Photoshop today. Any more? This is one where I had to design 2 design boards. And so looking back at our portfolios, we might decide that we need to change some of the colors on this to match the design board, or to match the actual collection that we designed, or whichever. So I downloaded this design board, that dinosaur one, and I'm just going to show you how I might go back into this and edit it. So if you have saved your Photoshop files, it's very easy to just go in and adjust, right? But I'm gonna try to change some of these colors, and I might add swatches up top. I think that Meg, who also runs the class, I think that she stressed color chips in a design board more than I did. So going back and adding color chips to design boards that correspond with your patterns might be good. I know a lot of you did that anyway. I just don't think I stressed it as much as she probably did. So let's say I want to change the color of this character here. He's already on his own layer. I can move him around, right? But I am going to I'm going to go to the adjustments panel and choose hue, right? And if I have his layer selected, this new hue layer will appear right above this layer. So I'm going to click on hue/saturation. So hue/saturation, right now, if we slide these bars, it's going to affect all the layers that are below it, right? So if I adjust the lightness, it's affecting everything but these two top layers. So if I want it to apply only to layer 4, let me get this back to normal. If I want this to apply only to layer 4, which is my little dude here, I can do that. I just have to choose this little, it's like a box with a down arrow next to it, and that means that it will apply only to the layer directly below it. So now when I adjust these sliders, it's only adjusting this little guy, right? So I'm going to set these back at 0. I didn't really want to adjust the lightness, but I do want to adjust the hue. So hue affects kind of like the overall color composition of it. It kind of slides it around the color wheel. But if you check off colorize down here, it kind of tries to make him into a new, make the whole thing into a new color, right? So now if I slide this down to yellow and raise the saturation, I can make him like a totally golden dinosaur, right? So that's the colorize tool that doesn't just try to adjust the color. It really makes it yellow. It colorizes it. So I can always re-edit this. It's a little bit different than going to image adjustments and choosing hue/saturation, because with this one I can always click on it again and adjust it if I don't like where the colors have gone. Okay, so that's just choosing, sorry, I'll do it with this guy. Nope, this guy. There he is. So we're just going to adjustments, and I chose hue/saturation, and I want it to apply only to the layer right below this. And now I can check colorize, and when I slide this wheel, it changes. Unfortunately, there's more going on this one. So I did want to show you another way, because this layer has like, I made a mistake and I like put some of the confetti on the same layer as this guy. So now it's turning all that confetti green, which isn't that nice. I don't really like that. So I can kind of isolate this guy. I'm going to trash this hue/saturation layer, and instead there's lots of ways I could do this, but I might just try to draw around him really quick. Yeah, John.
How do you make like a hue saturation layer versus?
Yeah, so it's just finding the adjustments panel, which if you can't find it, it lives under Windows Adjustments, and then it's this slider. If you hover over them in the upper left-hand corner, it tells you what these little symbols are there. Burp. And you just click it. And then choosing below applies it to just the layer. Choosing this little box with the arrow applies it to just the layer directly below it. Yeah, adjustments. So those adjustments like brightness and contrast, any of these can be used and then edited after, which is nice. You aren't stuck with that adjustment that you make, that you would be by going to image adjustments. So instead of adjusting his whole layer because he was kind of attached to some confetti, I'm going to draw around him. And then I can use the paintbrush tool and draw directly onto him. So I can try giving him, I don't know how this is going to work. I can try giving him a yellow belly, and if your paintbrush normally shows up with this mode being on normal, but these opacity settings should be familiar, right? This is just our multiply everything. So I'm going to try choosing multiply, which is what we normally use for this stuff. So I have changed my paintbrush to be on this multiply setting that allows the texture underneath to come through, and I can color directly on him, which can get kind of messy, but if you use your magic wand tool, or sorry, your lasso tool or polygonal lasso tool, you can get very precise with this application. So I could try switching it to a different color, making his head blue. I don't know. These are options. Maybe the colors on your design board aren't supportive of your like end color palettes and you want to adjust. I think you would, I don't know about him. Anyway, I also didn't include any color chips on this, and like I was saying, it might be good to go back and include color chips. So I actually want to copy and paste, or sorry, I want to pick out the colors from these patterns and choose those colors precisely. So to do that, I have this PDF, and if you had a JPEG, you could do the same thing. I'm just going to pick this page out of the PDF and hit OK. And there it is, and we can delete this later. But for right now, we're going to use it to get our color chips. So, yes, place the file. I like to do this with the rectangle tool, but I saw someone else doing it with the I like to do it with the rectangular marquee tool, excuse me, but I saw someone else doing it with the rectangle tool, and actually color palettes made with circles or other shapes can be very interesting, but I'm just going to do a standard one. So I'm going to draw a box here, and I'm holding shift so it's a square. I'm going to switch to my paint bucket tool, which might hide under your gradient tool, paint bucket. Paint bucket tool, when you hold Alt, it toggles to the paint color picker tool. It's called the eyedropper tool, but it picks out a color. So right now I'm on this weird teal color, but if I do that and click, it changes to the red color. And now I can, on its own new layer, right, because it won't let me fill on that layer, and it should be on its own layer anyway. I can come up there. So there's a lot, like, you could now copy and paste this layer over and over again and get it lined up, but my favorite way to do this is to switch back to the marquee tool, and when I hover over a marquee that's already exists, I can slide just the marquee over, so just this selection, and now I can switch back to my paint bucket tool, hit Alt, and fill, hit Alt, click the color I want, and fill. So the marquee tool allows me to move selections I've already made, so I don't have to keep trying to draw a marquee that is exactly the right size. Paint bucket tool, fill. Marquee, move over. Paint bucket tool, Alt for eyedropper, and fill. Command D is deselect, or you can go to select deselect to get rid of that marching ants. Now we can turn this off, this one. So I might move that around, but since they're all on the same layer, I can move them very easily, where if I like went and made one chip and then duplicated that layer and filled all of them, it would become unwieldy. But I don't know if this made this design board a ton better, but it's a little more interesting, I think. So that's something you might want to address in looking at your prints and your old projects. Okay. I'm going to switch back to Illustrator. Do you guys have questions on those design boards? Anything? Photoshop anything?
So do we need to have color swatches? Or is it like, because I definitely, like if it's
See, I don't know.
okay.
I feel like I'm hesitant to say one way or the other, and I think that once we get that official list from Sandra, it hopefully will become clearer. I think that as long as your design board really supports your colors, I think it's fine.
And also for the final, is that what we're like? Is that the big portion of our grade, or is it everything we've done? Or is it both?
It's both. Let me double check. So.
And are you grading that, or is the board grading?
So the board doesn't grade it, and we are going to break this all down further. We're going to break it down further at the end of this little lecture, this little review. But just in terms of the grades, because I can never quite remember. So 50, yeah, so it's both. So 50% is your final portfolio versions of each of these weekly projects and your final project. So doing this reprinting is really important and getting it all together. And so all of this will be together for our final, which is on the 13th, and then for the review, which is on December 17th and 18th. So we'll come back to this, okay? I promise. We just want to talk about colorways and then type, really, just a little bit. So, I am going to open up Graffiti Cheeks, our favorite pattern. And in Graffiti Cheeks, let me get rid of this. I wanted to review making colorways and some of the ways that I can grab different colorways. Let me move this out of the way. So if we have the original, that's weirdly locked. If we have the original shape that we made our that we made our tile from, right? If we have our original tile, this guy, and we can go to edit, define pattern, and make this into a seamless repeat. Although mine, Graffiti Cheeks is kind of broken. So if we look at this very closely, like it didn't actually tile. I have like something went wrong here when I was making the repeats.
Okay.
And there's lines in it, so it's not the best example, but we'll keep moving forward. Sorry. We can recolor this, right? So we can copy and paste it and recolor this. And this is a nice way to do it, especially if you want to include color chips. Color chips are not required. Meg had like no idea what I was talking about with them. So she has them put their color chips on their design board. And some of you have started doing color chips separately, like on separate pieces of paper, or like at the bottoms of your papers. I've just seen like a few of you do this, and I think it's fine. I just think you could be consistent if you're gonna show it. But anyway, you can select it all, and then you could manually change these colors, obviously. I could come in here and grab my magic wand tool and click on the red, right? And it's going to select everything, actually everything on the whole page, on the whole artboard that has red in it. So that might not be the best decision because it's going to change my other colorways. But that is an option. You could do that and then choose another color. Or, I don't know why it's slowly creeping right. I'm sorry. Weird. Why is that happening? We can go to, this color wheel, recolor artwork. It's probably under edit or objects somewhere, but recolor artwork button. And the first thing I always do is click on the little caret next to these right-hand swatches and change it to exact. This doesn't work, we want to be able to just change the color entirely. If you leave it on like scale tints or preserved tints, it tries to keep kind of like the tone of the artwork, and that's not super important to us. So we can either just double click on these swatches and then everything in that color would change, or coming over to edit, we can switch any of these little color pickers up. We can also lock it and keep the control going. It doesn't like changing black unless you double click on this, something like that. Yeah, I had to double click over here, and it did eventually add the black. So now I have a control for that black setting, probably. Oh, it's still all the way lowered down here. It's two different blacks. Yeah, there we go. So it is possible, but it does get stuck on black. You can't access like your normal color chips in here, but you can access some of these groups. So if I hit OK for now, I can make a new color group in my swatches panel if I want to be able to access specific swatches in my recolor artwork tool, which I might for some reason. I can create a new color group, and then I can add swatches to this. So these can either be custom swatches, like this blue is now in my fill box, and I can choose new swatch, and I can drag that swatch to my new little folder, or they could be any of these guys. Or if I want to add all the swatches from a particular, all the colors from a particular artwork, like let's say I really like these colors and I want to make a little folder of those colors, you can do that. Now I'm not sure, sorry, I figured that out earlier. Oh, new color group. Yeah, so I just clicked on these little dots, these little dashes up in the upper right-hand corner, and new color group. And you could name it, but there are all the colors that we had in this. You can save these guys, actually. We've probably never talked about this, but you can save this little swatch palette. So I could save this palette, and open it up later in my Graffiti Cheeks palettes. It saves it as like a little AI file. But also you could access this palette at any time by opening up Graffiti Cheeks, although you might want to bring this little folder into another file, and that's the way you can do that, by going and save swatches. If we all had like access to the Adobe library, like if you have your own Adobe account, I'm getting a little bit off topic, but the Adobe library is like super cool. You can drop stuff into your library that you can then access in any location as long as you're logged in. So it's just like a little Dropbox, but just for specific Adobe stuff. But sadly, we all don't have our own accounts, so I don't really address it that much. Okay, so that's colorways. We would then display these different colorways. Maybe we make one more colorway really quick. Exact. I'm going over to edit. I'm going to click this lock thing so all their color harmonies stay the same and adjust it. And then I can unlock it, you know, and try to really dial it in precisely. Like I don't really like the Graffiti Cheeks on that background. Okay, so with those two, we can go to Edit Define Pattern or Object Pattern Make in Illustrator. And it's a brick by row. Okay, so we'll do it for this one too. As long as you are defining these with exactly the same size and settings, right? And we are, because we've copied and pasted these. We can be pretty sure that we'll be able to get them to line up when we draw out these new rectangles. So I'm going to make a new artboard, and this is where we're going to show our repeats. If I draw these two rectangles, or our colorways, we're gonna do a split colorway, right? Which people have trouble with, so we're gonna review it. If I draw these two, one right after another, they will probably line up. I think there's this one. So we can draw that one, and I can kind of use my settings or my guide tools to try to get it exactly halfway. And now if I go make another rectangle, and I can, I'm just deselecting it so I can switch to another fill before drawing my next rectangle. Otherwise it would switch my first rectangle. If I draw the other one, they should line up perfectly. There are situations where you would have trouble doing this, and you might have to go to this whole right click, transform, scale, or move, and you would want to uncheck transform patterns, okay? So let me delete this one, because one of the ways I run into this is one of the ways I run into it is if I'm trying to copy and paste this one to make the second one. So we can move it 0 inches for right now, because we're just adjusting the transform patterns as kind of a setting. And I actually want to leave it on because I want to demonstrate what can go wrong here. So I can hit OK. So when we move this right now, the whole pattern moves with it, okay? So if we were to copy and paste it and move it, change the pattern, it wouldn't line up anymore, right? We don't have a seamless repeat across the pattern. So we can get around that if we just have that little guy unchecked, okay? So I'm gonna right click on it, transform, move, and I'm going to uncheck transform patterns. And again, we don't really want it to move. We're just adjusting that. And now when we move this, the pattern stays in the same place and the shape moves in front of it. Have you guys ever seen that cartoon, Chowder? It was on. So Chowder is a really specific animation style where the patterns on the clothing stay in place and the animation kind of moves in front of the pattern. And that's what we want to be seeing. We want to be seeing this Chowder Style movement where the pattern doesn't move. So now when we copy and paste this and apply a new pattern or a different colorway, it does line up across the pattern, and we just have to get these lined up. And there you have a printable colorway board. If you wanted Graffiti Cheeks to be a really large scale print, and again, this is not my finest print, we can transform scale, and right now it's scaling the whole rectangle, but it's actually not transforming the pattern, right? The pattern is staying the same scale. But let's say you actually wanted to show Graffiti Cheeks as a very large scale print, so something even larger, something like this, where you can see all of my imperfections in it. You can and should show it at full scale, even though we don't see like all of your artwork here. You're just then going to display it at a smaller scale in another print, right? So you don't have to show your prints at 2 scales, but if your print is really large, then you should show it at scale and then also a small scale. What else? Okay, so we're just going to review fonts really quick, and we're also going to review how to use outlines in your repeating patterns. There's lots of places to get free fonts. It's not the most ethical, but you can find all sorts of custom fonts out there.
Have you heard of
Calligrapher? No. Should we Google it?
Yeah, but it's basically
Is this how you spell?
I use this in my other class for my other projects, but you can basically like write your own font and then like you scan it onto your phone, and then it basically makes it into like a computer font, and so
Very
now
cool.
then you can use it into other work. So you know,
That's
if
cool.
the question of ethics ever comes up, and
No, that's much better.
their own fonts, they can always do that.
You can also always buy fonts. It's just that most of you are probably not going to. I do tend to buy fonts in my professional work, but or like textures and stuff. Like you can just find really fun stuff out there for sale that you can use in your own artwork. This is very cool. It's kind of hard to make your own font in a traditional way. I've only like made like a few letters before that actually worked. So that's interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
So calligrapher. So if you install fonts, then they pretty much instantly show up in Illustrator. So that was called Cheetah Kick. There it is. And we can make that bigger. So I maybe like this font a lot, but want to adjust some specific aspects of it. Maybe I want to make it less in a straight line, or maybe I want to make the C longer, right? So it kind of like gives it a swoopy underline, a more dramatic one. Right now I can't do that because it's just text. But if I go to Object Expand, or actually Object Expand would probably work, but the one that I've showed you before is Type Create Outlines. We're going to talk about Object Expand in 1 second. So we'll do that. And now it is all editable text. What's interesting about this cursive one is that it's overlapping shapes. So you would have to kind of keep that in mind if you were going to adjust anything super crazy. but I can use my white selection tool and kind of draw boxes around them and try to make things smooth again and really make this shape my own. Right, so once you have something that you like, you can, don't, I feel like all of these were corners for some reason. That looks okay. Maybe though, maybe you've fallen in love with it with a stroke on it, right? Maybe you really like it with this hot pink stroke on the outside. Maybe you like it with a little bit less. And maybe the fill is a more interesting color. But most of you might have said up until this point, and I have talked with a few of you about this, and I might have said it in class, I don't know. But you can run into problems using outlines on patterns, right? Because if we draw a background for it and we want to start Ghostbusters, make it maybe blue. If we grabbed this and we wanted to make a seamless tile out of it, and we found our Pathfinder. I guess I already had it out. Here it is. If we chose divide, it puts this ugly, ugly line through it. And I know I've addressed this with a few of you. And actually, that would be problematic for this one too, because these letters overlap. So it's putting an outline on wherever they have an overlap, which is very obnoxious. But there is a way around this. So if we select everything except maybe the background, it doesn't really matter if we have the background selected or not for this particular thing. And if we go to Object Expand, Fill and Stroke, now when I zoom in, this is subtle. My stroke is now made of fill. So I'm going to hit Control Z. Right now, my shape has a fill and it's got a stroke on the outside, right? And this is the stroke line and it's got a big, thick stroke on it. If we go to, let me select it all again and then I'll zoom in. If we go to Object Expand, now when I click into here, this is a fill. My stroke is now a fill. There is still a line. What's confusing about it is there is still a line where like that original stroke was, because my fill color comes all the way up to that. But this is now made of fills. Let me hit Control Z until it looks normal again. And this actually, you could at this point make your fill thicker, right? So it would be kind of dramatic and add a lot of depth to a print if you just did something as simple as that, right? Something as simple as making that thicker. Anyway, now when we select it all and choose divide in order to make our seamless repeats, we have no overlaps. We do have like a million tiny pieces, but at least we have no ugly line in there, and we know how to deal with a million tiny pieces. Okay, I'm just gonna hit Control Z again and talk about one more thing on that front. So you guys may have noticed that you cannot make a pattern with a pattern in it. So let me ungroup this. So if I grabbed this and tried to put a pattern in it, let me ungroup it one more time so it's still just the fill. Just the fill, come on. Just the orange. And actually, I will even select all of the orange by going to my magic wand tool and doing that. And then choosing that pattern again. So if I wanted to make a pattern like this, right now if I went to Object Pattern Make, it says patterns cannot contain anything painted within a pattern. So it's basically saying patterns cannot contain patterns. There is a way around this, and I've hesitated to tell you about it until now because when you bring patterns within patterns, like there is a way to do it, but when you do it, when you bring it into pattern design, it can be fairly overwhelming for the computers and make everything run extremely slowly. So I'm actually only going to do it to the C. Let me see if I can choose these without going crazy though. That's because these are then, after we get this working, these will then be made up of a million tiny parts, right? That are all your pattern pieces. We'll just put that orange back on this. Oh well. If we go to Object Pattern, sorry, we're going to select the C. I got a little distracted. Select the C, and we are going to go to Object Expand. Object Expand will turn this fill into its own little shapes. So there is a subtle difference already. Now if we hover over this stuff, it will show us the shape, right? Where before it was just a flat pattern. Subtle, but that is the big difference. And now when we select it all and go to Object Pattern Make, it will accept it, but it might take its time doing it. Oh, it did it fine. In the last class, it had to think about it for a long time. And that is a real concern, is it having too much to think about in pattern design. We've discussed that before, especially when it's trying to replicate it across this shape. It has trouble with it. Okay. So that's Object Expand. And it can expand patterns into shapes, and it can expand lines into fills. The reason this ends up taking so long is because if I ungroup this, if I just start choosing right-click ungroup on this guy, right-click release clipping mask, right? It's made up of your pattern. This is your pattern is in it, and it's just a clipping mask on your pattern after you choose Object Expand instead of kind of like a system recognized pattern. Okay. Questions on colorways or fonts or type or outlines or anything? Questions? All right, we are going to break down the portfolio review now. I know we did discuss it last class, but let's jump back on Moodle. Yes, on November 15th is today's class. So, part of your homework for over the break is to make any necessary changes to your previous assignments, and I think that we will be, this is what we're mainly working on today in class after we're not really doing a crit for your texture mapping. I'm just gonna go around and check it, but it'll be what you're working on. So portfolio review on December 17th and December 18th of review week. All of the sophomores will be meeting with you in a panel, and you'll be sent a schedule with your appointment time, and each of these faculty members fills out a review form, and it's not a test, and your performance there doesn't affect your grade, but you are required to go there as part of this class. If you don't go, that will affect your grade. And it's just so that they can figure out your strengths and look at everything at once from all your classes. So the official list by Sandra has not been sent out yet, but all of these projects will probably be on the list, so I still say it's according to Kelsey because it's not official. But this is on today's class, okay? So November 15th, class 11, all of the projects required in your final portfolio according to Kelsey. Your first type project, we never printed this one. I would hold off on printing this one again until we get that for sure list from Sandra, because there was some discussion of leaving it off of there, like, but I'm not actually, I don't know what we landed on, so just hold off on that. But everything else you could definitely reprint. Your cultural inspiration, unfortunately, I think I misunderstood that assignment / misunderstood how important it would be for the portfolio review that everything is consistent across the other classes. So you might need to craft a mood board for your cultural inspiration. You should have your PowerPoint, which should have really great images in it that you can just drag into a Photoshop. So hopefully that won't take you very long and you could knock that out today. That would be a really good one to knock out. And then you have your 3 repeating patterns for that and your 3 colorways for each of those prints. Conversationals, mood boards, 3 repeating patterns, 3 colorways. Florals, mood boards, 3 repeating patterns, 3 colorways. Big digital print, your mood board for that one, and just 1 repeating pattern and 1 texture mapped photograph of this print, right? And then your final project, which we have reviewed already. So we can expect each of those things to be on the list, most likely. Questions on any of that? Okay. So that's what after break, you can kind of ask me questions based on what you think, and then I think I'm just going to take a second to flip through each of the stacks that you should have brought in today, and just like in the last class, I just stuck a sticky note on anything that I saw, and you guys probably know about what I'm going to sticky note, so don't take offense to it, but I'm just going to do it, okay? All right, cool. So that's that.